Hello, I'm Christopher Lopez, and this is the StarCraft Observer. The show centered around the real-time strategy game StarCraft and its real stories from the community. We talk to artists, streamers, players, creators about their first encounter with the game and how it's changed their lives. Hello, listeners, and thanks for tuning in to this month's episode. Today, we focus on someone whose content revolves around the Let's Play format. It's a format in which you see someone play through one of your favorite video games that you grew up playing as a kid, or playing through one of the latest video game releases. But our guest today puts a twist to that format. Rather than just help you relive your days as a kid, he also focuses on the non-competitive communities, the ones that help keep the video games moving forward long after their release. More specifically, the map makers, arcade creators, and the modding community. While watching one of his videos, you can't help but enjoy the honest, emotional reactions he gets from playing through custom-created content. Here he is playing through an arcade game titled Zealot Commando, which was submitted by Matic, who is one of the many creators in the arcade scene. So on to the
next one. This was submitted by Matic, who has submitted to the last two Mapperinos.
And in this clip, you can hear him introduce the custom arcade game.
Stealth game. Take control of a team of deadly specialists and sneak in the shadows between helpless Marines. You'll need to carefully choose your approach to infiltrate heavily defended bases and outposts. Being spotted means death. Oh, no. Oh, no. So if you didn't know this, you may know this from previous series that I have done. I am really bad at stealth stuff. Maybe because I'm impatient. Let's just go and see what happens.
And once he jumps into it, you can see a zealot that can control through this canyon-like map with a bunch of rocks that you can hide behind. And there's various Marines spread throughout the map.
Interesting, so you have to click on them.
And when you click on one, it'll display their field of vision. And if timed correctly, you can sneak up on them and slice through them. But you have to hide the body before any other patrolling Marines find it.
Pick up a body? What? What are we playing, Deus Ex? Okay, hang on a second. I could turn my...
It's a pretty incredible arcade game that I myself had the chance playing and highly recommend to any of those that are curious. Once again, that arcade game is Zealot Commando. And during that playthrough, that voice you heard was none other than Jayborino. Just hearing his sheer enthusiasm for this particular arcade game makes me want to fire up StarCraft 2 and play it right now. There's just this magic in his voice and his deep appreciation for these various communities that really just pull you in alongside him. Jayborino has been highlighting these various communities all via his YouTube channel, Jayborino Plays. That's Jayborino Plays, one word. So today, I sit down with Jayborino and get to know him and where it all began, starting with his very first console.
I started with the Super Nintendo, and my parents were... I don't want to slander my parents. I have a great relationship with them. But it's not that they said no games. They just were more hesitant with buying them for us, and it wasn't a money thing, as far as I know. They just wanted us to be more like outdoorsy kids. So a lot of the times I'd go outside and meet my friends, and then we go to their house and play a game.
Just say like, "Hey, Mom, we go outside and play," and then little do they know, you go over to your friend's house and you're like over there playing on their consoles. Who was it that asked for a console? Was it you, or was it somebody else?
I honestly don't remember what led to the Super Nintendo at first, but that was where I got really into Donkey Kong Country, which is like the OG Jayborino series that I ever played. I'll always have like a deep love for that series on Super Nintendo. And then N64 I pushed for really hard and eventually got, which was great. And that was more like a shooter era for me, where I was like really into GoldenEye and Perfect Dark and that kind of stuff.
So you get a gaming console, and like, what do you remember from playing at your friend's house?
I think a lot of it at the time was sort of an awe. Like, not always, but the first time I'd see a new game, like the first time I remember seeing Shadows of the Empire on N64, which was, I think, one of the earliest titles for that game. It all seems so quaint now, but at the time I saw it and just thought, this is so cool. I loved Star Wars. And it was just incredible to me. It was the same when I saw Dark Forces on PC, which is like a Doom clone. They actually made a totally separate engine, actually. But it was this Doom clone, but it was Star Wars. And again, at the time, I guess it's hard for younger folks to imagine this, but at the time, those like 2D hybridized 3D shooters were like incredible, cutting edge.
Yeah, and I definitely agree. It was like one of those things where, I don't know, it's like at the time it's mind-blowing. Like it looks so realistic. And then when you look back on them, it's like, oh, I thought that was real? Like, that's crazy. But
Yes.
there's something about that magic, though, that still pulls you. And even when you play it today, it's just like, wow, this is like, I think it was like the story and the way everything was done, especially, Shadows of the Empire. Because who do you play as in that game? Because you don't play as anybody, you play like as a side hero, right?
You play as Dash Rendar, yeah.
Yeah, and he has like this jetpack, if I recall, and then I remember getting through like the sewers, and there's like this big like octopus monster in the water, and yeah, like that game was it was awesome, dude.
Which I think if you take anybody today who's, didn't grow up around that time period, if you had them play it, I wouldn't say that they'd say this is trash. It's more that it would be almost confusing because there just weren't the language of video games, the things that we sort of intuitively take for granted with how we recognize how to play at the most fundamental levels. It was very different back then. My neighbor, I remember, was the one who had Shadows of the Empire. And then I had a couple friends further down the street that I went to school with that I was good friends with. And one in particular that I'm thinking of was the first one who had Warcraft 2.
So that was your first encounter with RTS?
I think so. I never owned Warcraft 2, but it was the first one that I can remember where I saw it at my friend's house, and I just thought, what is this? What is this? This just seems so cool. And I think a lot of it was the evocative, like specifically the sound design, actually. I didn't know it at the time, but I think that's what really captured me. And then I was watching the screen and I didn't really understand it, but it just seemed so cool that there was this whole menu on the side where you could just build stuff. And that seemed so interesting to me.
Right. And did you get a chance to play?
I don't think so. I think I just watched my friend at the time. And then my other friend is a different person, had StarCraft. And I didn't realize that these were related at all. I didn't realize it was like the same people or that it was like a tangential series. And I saw StarCraft a couple years after. And again, it was that same kind of, it was that feeling of awe. I'm sure, like you had mentioned, you remember as well. Seeing something on the N64 or seeing like at the time, cutting edge PC game, it was like a wondrous feeling. Like, I don't own this, but I really want this. Like, I don't even understand what it is, but I want it so bad.
Having encountered StarCraft for the first time and being fixated on a game that immediately pulled him in and had him in awe, his parents would soon begin to take notice as to how much he wanted this game. Though Jayborino can't recall just exactly how they knew, but they knew. He mentions that it could have been him constantly drifting off into the gaming section at his local Target or Walmart, where he could be seen looking at the display and wanting this game. Think of it like going to that section where they had all the gaming strategies, and there's that one that looks so cool that you started reading through the strategies, even though you didn't have the game. But there was just this magic about it that had you purely obsessed. And as a fellow parent, if I saw this, I knew that this would be the thing to get my kid for their birthday. And so, for Jayborino's 12th birthday, they got him the StarCraft Battle Chest. And you said you got it for your birthday, the Battle Chest?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that day?
I remember booting it up for the first time with my dad, because back then, installing a game required more steps than it does now, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And I remember loading up the cutscene. I was so excited. And then those old blocky cutscenes, which were really impressive at the time, and that salvage ship gets blown up and you see that dude's head explode into little pink cubes.
Yeah.
Which, again, it's very quaint now, but I remember my dad watched it and he just kind of gave me that look like I know what you've done, because I asked for the game and they were concerned that it was I wasn't old enough for it, and he kind of gave me that look. Like, he like smiled, but like he gave me that like I know look. That's what I distinctly remember from that day.
Just between us.
Yeah, pretty much.
Finally having installed it onto his PC and Jay's dad being on the same page, Jayborino would begin to venture out and begin crafting his own stories at a very young age. You're just sticking to a variety of games. You're not just pegged to StarCraft, right?
I think once I got StarCraft, a lot of my time shifted to that. So prior to that, I was playing a lot of first-person shooters. Again, I was a kid, so it wasn't like I'm a big Call of Duty fan. It was just like I really liked GoldenEye, I really liked Perfect Dark, the N64 genre of shooters, and I would play those with my friends and stuff. But once I got StarCraft, I distinctly shifted a lot of my time to that. I got really engrossed with the editor and specifically the use map settings stuff on Battle.net.
Oh wow, were you building your own content at a young age?
I tried to, and nothing was ever released. But I remember writing what was the equivalent of like fan fiction, Star Wars stuff in like making maps in StarCraft, and I had a general idea of how to use the basic editor. And then there was I forget what it was called. So the base editor was Star Edit, but then there was like it was called Extra Editor with like two X's or something. And it wasn't SCM Draft like we have now, which is a lot more functionality, but it was just the base editor with like a little bit more functionality. And I would, place units and I would rename them, and I would try to emulate some of my favorite stuff that I played on use map settings.
Gotcha. And you mentioned that you were starting to write your first set of fan fiction.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't write fan fiction, but I would equate this to like I would take something from one universe that I liked, which was Star Wars, and I would just take the characters and I'd plop them into StarCraft.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. So you kind of create like a Star Wars narrative within the StarCraft universe, but using all these other things.
Yeah, it's from the perspective of like a young teenager, so it's not like anything was super well put together.
Do you remember that storyline that you kind of put together for that first time?
No, I just took characters that I liked. Like the Star Wars expanded universe was like 40 years chronological at that time, like in universe time. So there were all these different characters, and I like took all the bad guys and I put them on the map, and I took all the good characters that I liked, and I put them on the map, and that was pretty much that. I really liked. I actually would love to play these today if people in my community remember this. They were Lord of the Rings maps, and they were spawn camp maps where you'd have the different factions on the world map. So like say you were the Gondor player, and you would have all the Gondor stuff on the map, and you had like Minas Tirith and Dol Guldur as your like spawns, and every minute you'd have that spawn building give you 10 different units.
Oh, wow.
And then like every faction on like all of Middle Earth had those spawns. And then there was like the Fellowship, which was like exclusively heroic units, and you'd go and like try to snipe the other players' spawn buildings. And I really loved those. I played those for years and years and years. So I tried to remake one of those, but it was like Star Wars themed, and it was just all these potpourri characters from throughout the expanded universe.
That's awesome, man. You're mentioning the editor. Where did you go to like get instructions for that? Because it was hard.
Yeah, those didn't really exist at the time. And if they did, again, I was too young to probably healthily engage or even find like reasonable forums online. Chat rooms back then were a lot less, number one, trustworthy, but number two, like they were just harder to find. And so I don't remember ever looking for like community help. I would try to reverse engineer maps that I downloaded from Battle.net.
Oh, dude. That's crazy. Like that's like crazy in the sense that like you're using it to, your motivators to create these stories, and you're taking this complicated tool that you barely know anything about and just creating something amazing out of it. Like that's awesome, man.
Yeah, it was really fun. I mean, when I think StarCraft, like from my childhood, it was probably playing those Lord of the Rings maps. I loved those. And then just sitting and staring at the editor and trying to understand how switches worked in the trigger editor of like the original editor, that kind of stuff. That's the stuff that really stands out to me, which I guess makes sense now why I'm looking at community content.
Jay would go on to create maps for a short period of time, but eventually life would begin to take its natural course. Jayborino gets to high school, gets a part-time job, goes to college, still manages to squeeze in some time for StarCraft, but eventually pivots away and gets fully enveloped in World of Warcraft because Burning Crusade had just released at this time. And it's this pivot that would lead him to meeting up with his guildmates at an event that always takes place in beautiful Anaheim, California. So where were you when you heard the announcement for StarCraft 2?
I was actually at BlizzCon in 2008.
Oh, wow.
I actually didn't see the initial StarCraft 2 announcement, and it was one of those things where they announced it, and I'm like, this isn't going to come out for a long time. But I went to BlizzCon in 2008 with some guildmates, because this was when I was playing World of Warcraft. And This is actually like the tail end of me playing it. And that was the BlizzCon where they announced that StarCraft 2 is going to be 3 games instead of 1. And they showed the cinematic where Zeratul reading the prophecy and Kerrigan shows up and everybody claps. And then they're like, oh, we got a big surprise for you. Instead of just 1 game, it's going to be 3. I don't know exactly what they said. That probably wasn't that. But it was like the most confused applause. Like, it wasn't excitement. It was just like, is this good? Like, I'm paying for 3 games instead of 1, and it's going to come out over the course of a long time instead of just 1 game. I remember that was what the crowd, like, you could feel it in the crowd. Everyone's like, what does this mean? Why is it 3 games?
What do you think that was, though? Do you think that generation didn't understand like what they're doing?
I think that they released it as 3 games because they wanted to plan for specifically esports longevity, because they could release new units and change the meta when they decided to release the expansion. And they probably had started making the Wings of Liberty campaign and said, like, this is going to be way too much to do all 3 races in 1 game, is my thought. And I think the audience probably thought the same that they would today, which is, 3 games is going to, number 1, cost more than 1. And number 2, like, I'm really anticipating this game because I want some sort of conclusion to the StarCraft universe that was established. And now you're telling me that it's going to be 3 games that are going to come out over the course of like 6 or 7 years. So I'm not going to get that when you release StarCraft 2. I'm going to buy the first game and it's still going to remain unresolved.
Oh, wow.
That's what I thought, and I imagine that's how most people thought.
Yeah. I mean, because, I don't know. I guess what makes the difference? Yeah, because I'm a little confused because you have World of Warcraft that releases expansions like over the course of, I don't know, like 3-4 years or something. Yeah. And, StarCraft 2 is doing something similar over the course of like 7. So it's like, I don't understand the confusion. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think people were confused. I think people were just expecting a discrete experience with a start and end, and what they were basically telling us was this is going to be open-ended.
Gotcha. Okay.
And it's not, I don't think that people were there. I don't think people had expectations for that for StarCraft, at least. Though at the same time, the area of Blizzard in the late 90s, early 2000s was very much like, oh, it's the end of the game, but just wait. Here's a tease for the next game, but the next game doesn't come out for years and years and years and years and years. So you're anticipating it, and suddenly they tell you like, oh, by the way, you're not actually going to get an answer to that until Legacy of the Void, which doesn't come out until 2017. I mean, people weren't like mad. It wasn't like the Diablo Immortal announcement. It was just a case where people like were exhibiting excitement, but I just thought, I'm clapping, but I'm also questioning this. So therefore, I'm assuming everyone else, again, they're excited, but they also don't really understand the implications of this, or like they're not unhappy, but just sort of questioning this.
Was it like more along the lines that people wanted something to just conclude what happened in StarCraft 1 in 1 game, essentially?
That's hard to say. I obviously can't speak for everyone, but for me, I'm a casual campaign player, and that's kind of all I cared about besides the use map setting stuff. That's kind of all I cared about in terms of like the base game of StarCraft 1. I honestly I wasn't even aware of esports for StarCraft at the time. And yeah, again, Blizzard, like with Diablo and then Diablo 2 and then StarCraft, they all ended on this stinger of like, there's something else coming. And then the next game isn't released for 10 plus years. So yeah, I mean, I was really anticipating to see like what's going to happen to Kerrigan and what's going to happen to Jim Raynor and what's going to happen to Zeratul. And then they showed the cutscene of Zeratul interacting with Kerrigan, and everyone was like, "What? This is great!" And like this beautiful pre-rendered cutscene that we hadn't seen before. So yeah, I think at the time that's what everyone was. A lot of people, at least who were similar to me, were anticipating.
So, as you can hear me go back and forth a bit with Jayborino as to why people were surprised when they announced 3 games instead of 1, well, for some of those that don't know, StarCraft 1 had a single release with all 3 races and stories available right off the bat, and eventually following up with the official expansion, Brood War, that was released within the same year of 1998. As opposed to the saga that Blizzard created with StarCraft 2, in which you did have all 3 races available to you in the multiplayer online portion, but the trade-off was that you had to wait for an expansion to play as each race in the single-player portion to have a conclusion to the overall story, all over the course of about 5 years. So, With StarCraft 2 on the horizon, that meant more StarCraft stories and content for Jayborino, which would eventually lead him to discover one particular mod that would set him on his journey to focus on user-created content. More of that coming up after the break. Hi everyone. If you're enjoying this podcast so far and would like to keep up with the StarCraft Observer, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, and Twitter, where not only will you get updates about the latest episodes, but you also get to see some beautiful StarCraft-related fan art. Once again, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, and Twitter. If you're enjoying today's conversation with Jayborino, go support them by subscribing to their YouTube channel, Jayborino Plays. There, you can find more of his videos and where you can get to see him play through tons of user-created content. Also, if you got a particular mod that you've been working on, feel free to contact Jayborino for a chance to have your creation featured. You can get to his channel by going to www.youtube.com/JayborinoPlays. That's Jayborino Plays, one word. More details can be found in the podcast show notes. Welcome back. With Jayborino shedding some light as to why there was a bit of confusion with the StarCraft 2 announcement at BlizzCon, we now dive into the next phase of his life, where he begins creating content on YouTube. Yeah, man. Like, I was looking through your videos, and I know that there's a bunch of these like user-created content, and for StarCraft and StarCraft 2, I just never dove into those. And watching your videos and seeing what you're doing, I was just like, this guy's doing it right. Like, he's highlighting like the people that put in, lots of work and hours into this thing that they love, and really highlighting all their work and actually playing through them and getting to experience them. And that, just watching you go through it and experiencing it, and me watching this, like, it really it really brought me into it. And I was really happy that somebody's doing this, and appreciate somebody who can see another aspect of the community too that I never saw or never heard of before, and is bringing it to light. Like, how did you get that idea?
Oh, that's a good question. I think that when I started on YouTube, I was sort of riding a copycat trend of Let's Players. This was around not the earliest days of YouTube, but around the time when like Chugga Conroy and Nintendo Capri Sun were like really big. They still are, but they were kind of the folks that were driving like YouTube content creation for games. And like Husky StarCraft, for example, another good one. And I think sort of a combination of those personalities where I thought like, I could try this, I could do this. And I recorded myself playing Donkey Kong Country, and they're still up on my channel. And I didn't commentate over them, but I just started making videos here or there, and it just sort of went from there. And eventually, the first thing StarCraft related that I played was StarCraft Mass Recall, if you're familiar with. So this was like one of the earliest versions of it I played for my channel, and it was the first thing I commentated. And that was when I got like 100 subscribers to like 150 subscribers. And I had, of the few viewers that I had that were commenting, some were like, hey, you should check out some of these other campaigns. And I think that was kind of the tinderbox.
And what was your first reaction after like uploading that first playthrough and seeing the subscriber count go up?
Well, a big part of it was because the creators of the mod, who I still consider myself pretty good friends with today, separately of the mod itself, but like I'm friends with them on Facebook, for example. I might chat with them every so often. They linked my playthrough on their project page, which was, I think, where my first influx of any viewers came from. And the big thing with content creation, as I'm sure you know, is a big chunk of it that a lot of successful people won't admit is luck and just lucky exposure. And that's what I would consider Telenil linking my playthrough on his project page being.
Right. And who is that? If you can give us some background as to who that person is.
So there are two primary original content creators for StarCraft Mass Recall, which was Telenil and Jones. These are just their usernames. And so Jones I worked with Jones on the most recent anniversary update of Mass Recall. And so they're still alive, they're still around, and it's just been a crazy ongoing project with like so many different hands in there messing with it and updating it. It's a tough road for that project because so many people have worked on it, and it's a combination of so much different effort at this point. But I would say those two are like the main two folks that brought it to life.
So were they the first group of people that you took inspiration from, or did you even know about them when you did that first Mass Recall playthrough?
That's actually a really good question that illuminates how it's sort of like a small microcosm of Plato's The Cave, where like you don't know what you don't know. And then once you do learn it, you might even almost take for granted that you know it. In the sense that at that time, I was just like, whoa, it's StarCraft 1 and StarCraft 2. I never really even thought about who made it and the effort it took for them to make it.
Right.
And as soon as they reached out to me to ask me if they could link my playthrough, then I started thinking more about the actual effort that went in behind this.
That's awesome, man. That's really, really like that moment. Does that feel like the moment for you? Like, oh, like I'm onto something?
I think so. And I think from there, when I started playing other projects, I do make an effort to try to get to know the folks that are making these things. And I'd say a large part of my core community are content creators. And I really appreciate them wanting to like work with me, because I see it as it's a win-win rising tide, where if I'm showcasing your project, you're getting more exposure. And if you kind of work with me on that endeavor, then so do I, right? So now it goes both ways. And it's gotten to the point where now I'm at a higher level in terms of outreach than almost every content creator. So now it's kind of flipped the switch. Back in the day, I would sort of reach out to them, and now it's opposite, and they kind of reach out to me. But I still view it as a very much like a partnership in the sense of exposure.
That's so beautiful, man. Like I'm really happy that you created this thing to allow these like unsung heroes or like these unknown content creators that put so much effort into these games, and you know, you get to highlight their content and share it with the world. That's awesome, man. When you were setting out to create this thing that you got going, was that your main goal?
You know, it's weird. Making content for me it's just sort of satisfying by itself, where I don't really have like a viewership goal. I don't optimize my content for the YouTube algorithm. I just sort of play what I want to play. And the way I see it is there's a set amount of content, specifically like single player, more casual sided content out there. And I just kind of want to get through it all.
And getting through it all, he did. Because when it comes to StarCraft user-created content, Jayborino has practically played it all, and is at the point of waiting for something new to come out, or waiting for someone in his community to come across something that he has yet to play. And he not only dabbles in StarCraft-related content, but other games such as Warcraft 3, Lord of the Rings, Age of Empires, Command & Conquer, and much, much more. It's pretty crazy how much user-generated content there is out there, but every now and then, you're bound to encounter something that'll test your limits. Was there ever a point where you were getting burnt out?
You know, there was one specific point when I was really questioning whether I wanted to continue, and that was when I was making videos for the release of Warcraft 3 Reforged, which may speak for itself if people are familiar with the game. Warcraft 3 has always trended to the side of negative prior to Reforged, and it just was extrapolated exponentially when Warcraft 3 Reforged was released. And to be fair, they really, really botched it. It's a really, really poor release, and they haven't been able to fix it because they hemorrhaged the majority of their dev team. And when I was making those videos, the comments were all incredibly negative. Not all of them, but it's human to focus on the worst ones. And it was way worse than usual. And that's when I was really like, I don't want to continue this. And so I started taking breaks in my upload schedule. I started feeling less motivated even for my other series. And a big part of snapping out of that is just becoming more aware, like awareness preceding control there, and just realizing like, it's not that I hate this game. It's not that I hate the other games that I'm playing, but I'm becoming demotivated because I'm internalizing the negativity in my community because of this one specific game release. And just becoming aware of that really helped me kind of turn that around.
Was it the excitement of Warcraft Reforged that just sucked you into it in the first place?
I think that was also, that one was just straight like YouTube optimization. That one I will admit. and I admitted it in the series as well. Like Warcraft 3 does really well on my channel. I like the game. I have a good time with it. There's plenty of custom campaigns that I play for that one too. And it brings in the most viewers on my channel. And so, of course, when Reforged came out, I'm like, of course, I'm going to cover this like right away because that's going to bring in a ton of viewers, and I'm going to play the game anyway. But it was a very negative experience for a while.
You eventually make it through, right? Like you make it through the whole series?
Yeah, so I was putting out videos every day, and then eventually I was taking longer breaks, and then people were saying, where's the next video? Where's the next video? And then when I finally came back and I just said, hey, this is how I've been feeling. This is why I haven't been releasing. I'm a little bit bummed. And then the pendulum kind of swung, and like more than some commenters, like my more core audience might take that a little too much to heart, and then they get like really nice and really positive, and then I almost feel bad because I'm like, you don't need to do that. I just felt the need to be honest about this rather than trying to make an excuse or not mention it. And yeah, eventually I finished the series, and so much can change when you become more aware of your own mindset. That's why like I'm a really big proponent of like, if you're feeling bad, ask yourself, am I hungry? Am I tired? If yes to either of those, then you'll immediately recognize like, I'm in a bad mood. And if you can say that to yourself, it will change your act. It'll help you encourage changing your actions so that you won't be an asshole to the next person you talk to.
Yeah. I actually need to be better about that because there's just this thing, not that I'm like an asshole to people. It's just like this thing that I'm trying to power through, like, cause I'm so limited on time that I don't stop to think about those things. Like, am I hungry? Am I thirsty? And what was the other one that you said?
Am I tired?
Yeah. Am I tired? Like, I don't stop to think about those three things because there's just so much needs to get done. But, I need to incorporate that because I think that can easily reflect on the stuff that you're creating, essentially. And that doesn't make for great content. You don't want your negative emotions making their way into the stuff that you love creating. So, yeah, thanks for that, man. That was really eye-opening.
It's just so easy. Like I have a perfect example. There was a campaign I played in Warcraft 3 where it was like a limited resource mission. So you couldn't harvest gold or lumber to make more units. You had a set amount of resources. And you had ghouls, which are a combat unit, but they harvest lumber for the faction that I'm playing as. And the people, and I get so many comments like, Jayborino, use the ghouls to harvest lumber. They're kind of like wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Like you can cheese the mission by gathering resources that you're technically not supposed to have. The creator had explicitly removed that ability to do that. And I tried it in the video. This video is like 3 years old, and I still get comments saying, dude, just use the ghouls to harvest lumber. And if I just woke up and I'm like scrolling through my notifications and I see that, you're just like, how do they not know at that point? Cause like I say it in the video and there's like 100 other comments saying the same thing. And it's like infuriating. But that's that moment where I'm like, okay, like I just woke up. The situation is inherently stupid. It doesn't matter. If you respond to it, all that's going to do is encourage more stupid comments in the future. So just let it go.
And we've all been there where we promise something to our family, friends, community, audiences, etc., that we're going to do or at least attempt to undertake a particular project that we imagine being an easy and fun experience for everyone. But then somewhere along that road, things don't turn out quite as expected. And we find ourselves in a position of having to live up to that promise, dreading each day and forcing ourselves to power through the very thing that we thought was fun. But one thing we can do to prevent ourselves from getting to that horrible point is to communicate. Be honest with ourselves. Be honest with our friends, families, communities, and take the needed breaks every once in a while in hopes that we become aware of what's actually going on. That's how Jayborino was able to get through the Warcraft 3 Reforged series without getting burnt out. So, making it through with his sanity intact, he goes back to making his usual content that he enjoys doing and creating for his community. Throughout this episode, you may have noticed that we constantly touched on certain aspects of community-driven content and creating material for said communities. And with Jayborino putting out a video almost every day, having a Discord, going live on YouTube, I got very curious as to how he does it all. You have 47,000 subscribers. When you think about that number, what comes to mind?
Most of those are inactive. That's what I think of first. Like, it's an impressive number. And again, I still get more views than most that would ever start on YouTube. But, a lot of that, like the subscriber number is an inflated metric. I'm a research analyst, so like I dig in, I could talk about YouTube analytics for legitimate years. But I'm not too. I would love to get to 50K just because it seems cool, but it's not really representative, I think, of my actual viewer base.
Yeah, gotcha. How do you handle things such as low viewership for a video that you were excited about?
Usually I don't care. Like I recorded GoldenEye last year because I was like, I found this emulated and is really high quality, and I always loved GoldenEye, so I'm going to play it. Because it's not part of my niche. I know that no one's going to watch it, but I did it anyway. So in that case, I expected low viewership. But the stuff that I'm excited about is a good twist to that question. Like Jayborino, for example. If engagement for that comes in really low, I'd like to pretend like I wouldn't care, but that's something where I'm really excited about it, and I would hope that people also did. And thankfully, participation in that has remained steady, if not increased over time. So it's really, really cool.
With the way you're creating content, do you feel like you're kind of at your limits in terms of your schedule? Like this is your schedule and I know realistically, this is within my boundaries.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's a really important thing to do. So I'm not someone who over plans. Like having a packed schedule makes me anxious. I like having some flexibility. But in the case of my channel, it's very important to me to, again, have those boundaries set up. So there are times when I will record a whole series because I'm really excited about a game, and I'll just release it every day. And that's because I know that I can at that point. But it's very difficult for me to do something consistently beyond my normal. Like I have a video every day. I typically record on the weekends, knock them out, upload them, and that's that. But it would be, to do more than that would be very difficult for me.
And how do you deal with missing a day?
There's never been a day I've missed where I've been like, oh man. Sometimes missing a day can be a relief, because usually if I miss a day, it's because I'm having computer problems or there's an issue with YouTube processing, and that inherently makes me start to feel a little behind. So being able to skip a day, or have an excuse to skip a day, I should say, is kind of like, okay, well, I've got a lot more time until next week, until the next video. So last month rather, I had some issues with some Age of Empires videos. They weren't processing. I didn't feel anxious about it. I just sent out and said, hey, I can't get these up. I'll just release them next week. And there's no problem. Yeah. A big part of it comes down to my own expectations and thankfully not having to depend on any sort of revenue stream from this. If I did, then yes, I would be a lot more stressed and concerned, and I would plan a lot more. But because this is a hobby of mine, like if I have to miss a day, it just doesn't really concern me.
Right. Yeah, which like for this podcast, for example, I'm trying to do month by month, but having a family, full-time job, and just having to spend time with my family, it just takes up a lot of my time. I only have like a weekend, and I'm getting into this mode of like, oh, dude, I got to release every month. Do you have that same stress, like of, I got to make sure I'm on the schedule?
Occasionally, yes. It depends on the circumstance. So if I don't know what I'm going to do, then yes, then I feel anxious about it. So for StarCraft or Warcraft, where I play custom campaigns, if I can't find something that I think would fit, like there aren't that many playable StarCraft 2 campaigns left that I have not played, and I've played like 40 or 50 of them at this point. So I've just gotten through most of the content, and it's not being made at a particularly fast rate. Then yes, that's when I start thinking like, what do I do? I don't like, once I finish this series in 2 weeks, after that, what am I going to do with this time slot? Because I can't find anything that would fit for it.
Mm. And what do you do in that case? So do you just replay through like old maps and just experience it all over again, or?
So usually it actually is a really good opportunity to pivot. So I used to release way more StarCraft 2 videos, and then I went from 3 days a week to 2 days a week, and now it's only 1 day a week. Because there's fewer things for me to play specifically. And again, that was kind of stressful at the time, because I'm like, what am I going to do? Like I'm in a nice routine, we're creatures of habit. I was really happy and content. And in a way, it sort of shocks the system. And that's when I started playing Warcraft. And extrapolating that, now I play Age of Empires, and I've been trying other games. So it's been actually a really good opportunity that's uncomfortable at first, but leads to really good things.
And at the time of making this episode, Jayborino has tons of videos, 7 years worth to be exact. And when you go back to the beginning from where it all first started, you'll notice a strategy type tower defense game followed up by StarCraft 2. But there's one series that stands out from all the rest of the videos he's created. One in which he mentioned at the top of the show was the OG Jayborino series. You mentioned Donkey Kong Country. That was the first game that you started your playthrough, right?
On my channel, yes. That was actually, I think the first playthrough I did was a tower defense game that I couldn't find any other Let's Plays for. But then the second thing I did was the Donkey Kong Country trilogy.
And what made you think of that, like, to do a playthrough of Donkey Kong Country, that is?
Yeah, it's still kind of what motivates me to play the games that I enjoy now, which is, if it's something that I enjoy and I replay quite a bit, then I'll make a playthrough of it. I like the idea of taking like a completionist playthrough of games that I replay and have enjoyed for most of my life, like Mass Effect or StarCraft or Dark Souls, and I'll make a recording of it, which sort of puts it in like a museum of gameplays, I guess, of my gaming past.
And I mean, these are just all games you enjoy too. Like, they're not like, oh, I'm going to do it because it's the newest thing. It's basically, I really enjoy this game because it brings me joy, so I'm going to play through it and share it to my community. Is that right?
Absolutely. I've been reading a lot lately on mental health, and like behavioral economics especially is really fascinating to me. And a lot of the topics that I've been reading lately are about the difference between like a social norm and a market norm. So it's kind of like if you were doing something for free and no one was paying for you to do it, but you were helping someone out, then, you're volunteering your time. You're sort of happy to do it because you offered to do it. But if someone offered you $1 to help them move, you'd sort of be offended by that. That's sort of how I treat my YouTube, in the sense that I don't really want to follow where the YouTube market is going. I'm just going to do what feels fun and right to me, which is not always the best way to grow in a social media sense, but that's never really been my goal.
Literally, it's Jayborino plays. Like, Jayborino plays this and Jayborino plays that. It's Jayborino plays. And because of that, in the process, this community starts coming together and forming. And, it's pretty big from my standpoint, going into your chats and, going into your live streams. Like, there's a lot of people like just engaging, and it's wonderful to see. Reflecting on all that, like seeing your community and, how it's all come together. Like, how do you feel about that?
I feel really good about it. It can be a bit overwhelming at times, where depending on it's very reflective of my mood at the time. Most of the time I'm very happy. I want to continue growing, and I want to provide a space online that doesn't feel as miserable at times. I think especially in the gaming sphere, we're muddled down by negativity and the anonymity effects leading to toxicity. And sometimes people just want a place where they don't have to constantly feel like they have to be on the defense. And I think that's okay. I think there are places for that. I mentioned earlier that I do quite like arguing, but gaming is not really one that I've ever felt the need to go hard on. I'm never gonna go in on like major gaming topics with the same sort of same sort of gumption as I would over like a political topic, for example. So back to like the community, I'm hoping that I can provide something that maybe other folks aren't able to provide them, which is a space around, I guess, real-time strategy, but really just sort of that level of gaming that centers around StarCraft and Warcraft, and sort of branching out on the stuff that I'm playing and hoping people can just enjoy that and have fun.
And for the young aspiring content creator to follow in your footsteps, what advice would you give to them?
Don't overcommit. I think folks have an idea of how cool it would be to be popular, to be a community administrator, to get 100 comments a day. I think you have to make sure that you understand why you have fun making content before you place any expectations on the type of viewership you will get. So, for example, when I started, I was just using like an $8 Logitech headset. Now, I wouldn't necessarily recommend everybody only use the Logitech headset, because at a certain point, if your audio quality is so bad, then yeah, you might off-put some viewers. But to get off the ground, don't go crazy with making this huge stream deck with all these different scenes and paying people to make you thumbnails and paying people to make you banner art and that sort of stuff. Don't, especially financially, don't invest a ton of money into a bunch of equipment into something that you're not sure you're even going to enjoy using. I think people enjoy the idea of growing as a content creator before they actually do it. And then once they start doing it and they feel that they're let down because they're not getting the viewership they wanted, then it feels even worse because you realize you've spent, hundreds of dollars on a microphone and a webcam and, a new monitor, et cetera, et cetera. So really, I think at the core, it's about managing your expectations properly and really taking time to understand yourself and your own drive to want to do it.
A big thank you to Jayborino once again for sitting down with me today and being a big supporter for the podcast. You can also hear more from him in the previous episode, Looking Forward, where we talk to people from around the world about their experience with the COVID pandemic and how they're coping with it all. And a big shout out to Subsorian for helping me fact check some things here and there. And thanks again for listening to this month's episode. If you have a story that you think is interesting and would like to share for a potential episode, you can contact the StarCraft Observer via Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or send an email to thestarcraftobserver@gmail.com. More details in the podcast show notes. Be sure to subscribe and let friends and family know about the StarCraft Observer. Editing, music, and production was done by your host, Christopher Lopez. Outro music by the talented Televangel. Head on over to their Bandcamp or YouTube. You can also find Televangel on Spotify. More details about Televangel in the podcast show notes. Until next time, friends, thank you very much.